Welcome to Beyond the Clinic, the podcast for health professionals ready to transform their expertise into innovative income streams that extend beyond the traditional clinic model. I'm Sarah Armand-Bushell. I'm a registered dietitian and certified business coach and proud owner of 2 successful online businesses. I understand the leap from the security of a regular salary can feel intimidating because I've been there too. But it doesn't have to be scary, and you do not have to do this alone. Here you'll learn tangible strategies to accelerate your business growth. So if you're dreaming of using your expertise to create impact and a life of freedom, then you're in the right place. Have you noticed that the number of people visiting your website has fallen? Maybe you've wondered, why aren't my blogs getting the amount of visitors that they used to? Even though you're still writing super useful content on your blogs, still answering the questions that your audience are asking, and still trying to keep your website up to date. This drop in traffic probably has you questioning all sorts of things like, do I need to create even more blogs? Or am I doing my SEO completely wrong? When you've spent years being told, create helpful content, answer people's questions, and Google will send people your way, it's really frustrating when the numbers start moving in the wrong direction. But this is not a you problem. It doesn't mean your blogs aren't good enough anymore. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've done your SEO wrong, and it doesn't mean that you need to panic and start churning out even more blog content to try and keep up. The simple fact is that online search has changed. We touched on this a little bit in the last episode when we talked about what you need to be doing to help your chances of getting recommended by AI. If you haven't listened to that one yet, I definitely recommend going back and having a listen. That episode was about making sure that AI knows that you're a credible source and feels confident recommending your name. But this episode is a different piece of the puzzle because AI isn't just deciding who to recommend, it's also deciding which information to use when answering people's questions. Now, for years, the goal of your website was really simple. Create helpful content, rank on Google, and people would click through to your website to read the blog and get their questions answered. Now the goal isn't just getting someone to click through to your website anymore. It's about creating content that answers the exact questions people are asking, because AI is providing the answers up front and people no longer need to click through to read your blog. So we need to give AI the information that it needs to confidently use your words when building an answer. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what that means for blogging and how to create content that AI will want to use when answering your ideal clients' questions. If you're wondering just how much things have actually changed, the numbers are pretty eye-opening. Research from last year from Pew found that when Google puts one of those AI answer boxes at the top of the page, people click through to an actual website about half as often as they used to. And the little source links that are tucked inside that answer box, well, they're clicked incredibly rarely, around only 1% of the time. What does that mean? It means more and more people are getting the answers they need without ever making it to the website that created the information in the first place. And that's a really strange shift to get your head around, because for years, the whole goal was to create helpful content and rank on Google and get people to then click through to build trust from there. But now the journey stops much earlier. It's a bit like having a shop on a busy high street, doing everything right, beautifully dressed shop window, amazing products, and making your shop the place that people want to visit. And then the road is closed and suddenly fewer people are walking down the street. I actually experienced this shift with one of my own websites. So at its peak, my children's nutrition website was getting around 150,000 visitors every single month. It was brilliant. I'd studied and mastered SEO, search engine optimization. The website had become a really valuable asset for my business. I earned money from selling advertising space on my website, and it wasn't unusual for me to make anywhere between £2,000 and £4,000 a month purely from these ads. Some months, it was more than I took home after tax as an 8B consultant dietitian in the NHS. Things were going so well that I even employed a team of writers, all dietitians or nutritionists. I had over 80 people at one point who would help me with various parts of the process. And we would turn out roughly 4 to 6 blogs every single month. And the more I published, the more my revenue grew. It genuinely felt like I had figured out the formula, create that helpful content, rank for it on Google, and then bring people to the website where I could sell them my offers and make even more money. But then things started to change. About 2 years ago, I noticed that the number of visitors to the website was slowly beginning to drop. At first, it was dropping by around 10,000 fewer visitors per month, and then it dropped by 50,000 fewer per month. And eventually, the website was getting around 100,000 fewer visitors every single month compared to its peak. Now, as you can imagine, it had a huge impact on my revenue too. The income that once sat around the £2,000 to £4,000 per month range dropped significantly, eventually sitting closer to around £400 per month, which is where we are at now. But the timing of this was what was really interesting because it happened at exactly the same time as Google introduced its AI, and AI started becoming part of everyday search behavior. And that's when I realized it actually had nothing to do with my blogs, and it had everything to do with the fact that the way people were getting information had completely changed. Let me actually explain what's happening here, because once you understand this properly, it stops feeling like this mysterious thing where your website traffic just randomly disappears and becomes something that you can actually work with and use to your advantage. Here's what you need to know. 2 things have changed about how people find you. The first one is happening inside Google itself, because Google isn't just one simple search engine anymore. When someone types a question into Google today, there's now different experiences all happening on that same platform. So the first there is the AI answer box at the top of the page that gives you that quick summary. And then there's also a full chatbot built into Google that some people use instead, where they just have a back and forth conversation, a bit like ChatGPT. Interestingly, those 2 different AI systems don't always agree on which sources they use. When researchers from Ahrefs compared them across hundreds of thousands of questions, they found that they were both pulling from almost entirely different sources. The way I like to think of this is like 2 notice boards in the same clinic waiting room. One notice board might be right by the entrance and another might be over by the reception. Getting your information pinned to one doesn't automatically mean you're pinned to the other. The second shift is understanding how AI actually reads and uses your content. Because when someone types a question into AI, it doesn't just look for that exact sentence and find the closest blog post. Behind the scenes, it's trying to understand the bigger question. It's looking at related topics. It's looking for context and different pieces of information before creating an answer. It's a little bit like a good clinician assessment. A client might come to you and say, I think I need help with my gut. But you don't just take that sentence at face value. You start asking questions like, what symptoms are they experiencing? How long has this been going on? What have they already tried? What's their past medical history? In other words, you're trying to figure out what is actually going on underneath the original question. AI is doing something similar. It's trying to understand the question behind the question. And this leads us to probably the biggest mindset shift in how we need to think about content. Because the old Google was mainly about ranking pages. The new search landscape is increasingly about finding the clearest pieces of information within those pages. So let me just explain what I mean. Imagine you've written a really detailed report for the GP after a client assessment. It's got all the background information, it's got history, it's got symptoms, everything. But the GP reads it and they only pull out the one sentence that answers the query they had. Essentially, that's what's happening with search now. AI isn't necessarily looking at your entire blog post and thinking, this is a great article, I'm going to recommend this whole page. It's looking for the clearest, most useful piece of information it can pull out to answer that person's question, which means one really strong paragraph can sometimes be more valuable than an entire 3,000-word blog. There is good news in this because it means you don't necessarily need to compete by creating endless amounts of content. You just need to create content that clearly answers the questions that your ideal clients are actually asking. So just to prove that, Ahrefs, the same company I mentioned earlier, conducted another study just in March this year, and they found that many of the pages Google now uses to create its AI overviews aren't even pages that rank in the top 10 traditional search results, which seems shocking, doesn't it? It just goes to show the game has completely changed. It used to be, how do I get my website to rank in the search results on the first page of Google? And now it's, how do I make sure my words are the ones being used when AI answers my ideal client's questions? It used to be that whole websites would be competing for visibility. Now it's just individual paragraphs and sentences competing. What should you do to make sure you're staying ahead of the game as search continues to change? Well, I'm going to give you 3 really practical things to focus on. Number 1, don't start by thinking, what blog shall I write this month? Instead, start with the questions you already know your ideal clients are asking, the ones that come up again and again and again in consultations, and the ones you find yourself explaining repeatedly. Then take one question at a time and create the clearest answer you can in one place. Don't have the answer to that question scattered across 5 different blogs or write one huge vague blog that tries to cover every possible angle. Instead, create one piece of content that clearly answers one specific question. For example, rather than writing a general blog called Everything You Need to Know About IBS, you might create a clear answer to the question, do I need to follow a low FODMAP diet if I have IBS? And then once you've written it, the test is really simple. If AI pulled out just one paragraph from this page to answer someone's question, would that paragraph give them a genuinely useful answer? If the answer is yes, you've created something that's easy for AI to understand, to use, and to share. And ultimately, that is the goal. So number 2, write for the paragraph, not for the page. Don't hear this as take out all of your stories and your fantastic personality, because those are the things that make you you and what sets you apart. That's still really important. It just means you've got to lead with the answer to the question first and then bring in the context. Your experience and your stories come afterwards. In other words, pay attention to how your answers are structured. So you want the headers as the questions your audience is asking, and then answer straight underneath. Make it so neither AI nor the person who's been newly diagnosed with IBS or celiac disease has to dig through half that page to find the answer that they're desperately looking for. And then number 3, go and see what AI is actually doing. This is probably the most valuable thing that you can do after listening to this episode, and something you can do super quickly too. Pick the 5 questions that you answer most in consultations with clients, and then open an incognito window in your browser so that your previous searches don't influence the results, and type each question into Google one by one, and take a proper look at the AI answer. Screenshot what comes back and build a simple list of who's showing up so that you can see whether it's dietitians or influencers who is being quoted, and then ask those same 5 questions in something like ChatGPT or another AI chatbot. Do the answers change? Are different people being mentioned? This becomes your starting point, because once you've seen it with your own eyes, you'll start to understand how AI is finding and selecting and using information. You'll be looking at the new search landscape exactly as your potential clients see it. It's worth mentioning that health is one of the areas where AI is most cautious about the information that it uses. So when someone is asking about their symptoms or their health, AI and search engines have to be much more careful about who they choose to quote. They're not going to treat a health article the same way that they treat an article about the best trainers for paddle or the best bean-to-cup coffee machines. The standard for health is much higher. And for years, you've probably felt like you've been at a bit of a disadvantage because you can't make bold claims and you always have to add caveats. So it can feel like the nutrition influencers making louder and more attention-grabbing claims online were winning at this game. But the great news is now, when these systems do decide to quote somebody on health, they've been built to source real, credentialed experts with genuine experience. So the exact things you've always had to be careful about before, like not making exaggerated claims and explaining the nuance, are actually the signals that AI values the most when it's deciding who to trust. You might be asking yourself, well, Sarah, should I still bother creating all of these blog posts? And the answer is yes. Content still matters, but the way you're going to win this new version of search isn't simply by producing more and more and more content. Instead, you need to be thinking about the role that each piece of content is playing. Is it clearly answering something specific that you know that your ideal client is Googling, is searching for? Is it giving AI a real clear understanding of what you know and what you're known for? And remember, your blog is only one part of the picture. As we talked about in the previous episode, if you want to get recommended by AI, AI is also looking at things like mentions of you elsewhere online and all of those little signals that help work out who is this person and can I trust them as the expert? So yes, keep creating content. Just don't panic and assume the answer is more blogs. Think about the quality and the purpose and the bigger picture. So if you found this episode useful, but you're wondering, Sarah, where on earth do I start? Start by picking one question that your clients ask you all the time, the one you find yourself answering again and again and again in consultations, and then create the clearest, most useful answer to that question you possibly can. Something that AI could easily lift and use. Don't try and cover every angle. Just focus on one specific question and one clean answer. Then once you're done, you can do another. Think of it as a bit like practice. You're getting used to writing in this clear, more direct way and giving the AI the kind of information that it can actually understand and begin to use. So that brings us to the end of this 2-part mini-series on AI and search. So in the last episode, we talked about how AI is deciding who to trust, how your reputation, your credentials, and the signals you have across the internet really help AI understand that you're a credible person to recommend. And then in this episode, we've looked at the other piece of the puzzle, how AI is deciding which information to use when someone is asking a question. And I think a lot of what we've covered is very encouraging for us as dietitians, because I know it can sometimes feel like the online world rewards a completely different skill set. You might think everyone else is so much better at getting attention than me. But the thing I hope you take away from these 2 episodes is that you don't need to win by being louder or posting more or chasing attention. The dietitians who will stand out in this new world of online search are the ones who simply make their expertise easy to understand. Bye for now. That's it for another week. Thank you so much for joining me as we explore the abundance of strategies to help you recapture that feeling of possibility and excitement as you drive your business forwards and beyond the clinic room. If you found today's episode inspirational, then don't forget to like and subscribe to the show to stay in the loop for more valuable advice that I'm going to be sharing each week. If you want to be the first to hear about new episode releases, news and ways that I can support your business growth, then please don't forget to check out the links in the show notes, and you can also connect with me from there. Don't keep me a secret. I would be delighted if you left a review and shared this podcast with your colleagues. Until next time, bye for now.